Good morning and welcome to a daily dose of good news on Thursday, July the 9th. Our good news today comes from Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 to 6. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight, and see why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. Then he said, Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He said further, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Here ends the reading. Well, it seems to me that if Moses had been able to walk up to that meeting place with God that day, certainly others would have been able to tread that same path on other occasions, ending up at the same GPS coordinates, as we might say today. And I would imagine that most of them did so while keeping their sandals on, standing there on that plain old dirt. What makes the ground holy for Moses is what happens there, is the encounter with God that touches his soul while he's standing there with his bare soles of his feet. Moses' encounter with God, who was intent on making God's self known, and soon after would hand down the law of the Ten Commandments, where people would encounter God yet again for generations to come. All of which has me wondering about the holy ground where you encounter God, the places where you take off your sandals as God touches your souls. Baptism for sure is a great example, as we gather around water that is just plain water until we encounter God there in the promise of God's name, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Those holy moments are holy ground, the likes of which we shared with Thomas Stephen Yasinoff last Sunday afternoon. Tell you a little story. The last time I heard a sermon preached on this Bible passage was during a worship service at the Beach Community Church in Costa Rica, where Annika's become involved while she works down there. And my soul was touched by God that day. God who was so clearly caring for my daughter in the midst of that community, such that before walking forward to receive Holy Communion, I slipped my sandals off in the sand and approached the sacrament with bare feet. I think we could have taken our shoes off at church last Sunday too, as a portion of our faith community gathered anew for worship, sensing the presence of God that no mask can conceal, and that AV equipment can even emanate to places far and wide. So many other moments and grounds that God makes holy with us too. Celebrating life and faith at the funerals of family and friends, reveling in the joy of conceiving and delivering a new baby, affirming and crossing life passages as graduations and new jobs and new homes, embracing each other in prayer during times of sickness, misfortune, distress, accompanying and serving those who are oppressed and in need. Holy moments of holy ground where we encounter God. Just as I have a few moments ago, you'll notice I'm offering the daily dose of good news this morning from my car, as I've just left the holy moment of holy ground with seeing Floridel fall for the first time in 4 months. She's in such good health, was delighted to have company. Talks about going to church every Sunday, how much she appreciates Columbus, even as she's no longer particularly familiar with me. It was a God-filled moment. Those moments with her have always been warmly intimate. Today it was warmly temperature-wise, because the only way you can meet at the facility here where she is at Gonshorn Suites is by sitting outside. So already at 10:30 in the morning is quite hot, and yet quite holy, by the presence of God, who is so clearly there in the midst of us. As I brought greetings from you, the congregation, and I share them now again from her with you. There are holy moments on holy ground all over the place, because God is all over the place, ready to grace you with a divine presence. Thanks be to God for the barefoot holy soul moments that you encounter today too. Amen. So I do bring you greetings from Floridel. It was great to see her again. Kristen and Nick Barnes have welcomed a new little baby. Talk about a holy moment with them. Yesterday is Gwendolyn Barnes. They're still coming up with a middle name, so we give thanks to God for her safe arrival, even as we continue to pray for Celeste as she is battling the COVID virus, and all the others with the hot spots springing up around the state and the country. I pray that you continue to stay well and be safe. We'll look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.